So good morning, everybody. Welcome to the webinar, Keys to Transformational Leadership in Evaluation. I'm very happy to welcome you. My name is Patrizia Cocca. I work for the Global Evaluation Initiative as a Communication and Knowledge Management Lead. We are very happy to continue this tradition that we have with Clear Francophone Africa to co-organize and co-host webinars together. Has been an incredible year. Last year, we had a very interesting conversation, and we are continuing also this year. As you may know, the GEI is all about knowledge sharing about M&E systems. We also, our goal is to build the capacity around the globe for empowering governments to make decisions based on evidence. And so, without further ado, I would like to pass the microphone to Edoé Agbodjan, who is the director of Clear FA. Edoé, thank you.
Thank you very much, Patricia. Merci tout le monde. As Patricia said, you can choose the language that you wish from the interpreters. So I'll be speaking in French. Donc, merci beaucoup. Nous sommes très heureux de vous avoir à ce rendez-vous du webinaire, du 14e webinaire co-organisé par le Clear Afrique francophone et le GI. Et ce webinaire va nous amener à discuter des clés d'un leadership transformateur dans le monde de l'évaluation. Alors, comme vous le saviez, les centres Clear, nous sommes engagés dans le renforcement des systèmes nationaux d'évaluation à travers une série d'actions, de plaidoyers, de sensibilisation, d'assistance technique pour la mise en place des outils qui favorisent la pratique de l'évaluation. Nous travaillons aussi sous l'égide du GEI dans le renforcement des capacités individuelles afin de faire émerger des champions d'évaluation, des personnalités qui peuvent porter les évaluations, faire les évaluations, commanditer les évaluations, mais aussi promouvoir les évaluations dans leurs domaines respectifs. Et nous menons une série d'activités comme le webinaire pour discuter un peu des leçons apprises, réfléchir ensemble pour pouvoir innover ensemble et pousser plus loin l'agenda du développement de la culture de l'évaluation. Alors, la thématique d'aujourd'hui est d'intérêt pour nous parce que dans notre pratique, dans notre mission de développement des systèmes nationaux d'évaluation, on s'est rendu compte que les hommes comptent beaucoup. Les décideurs qui comprennent pourquoi l'évaluation et qui veulent porter l'évaluation comptent beaucoup dans les avancées qu'on peut enregistrer sur le terrain. C'est à la fois des décideurs, mais aussi des évaluateurs convaincus qui travaillent chaque jour pour faire avancer l'agenda de l'évaluation, transformer les idées et permettre à ce que cette transformation que nous souhaitons puisse avoir lieu. Et donc, c'est l'occasion de réfléchir à ça dans les conditions où il y a de l'incertitude, il y a des changements prévisibles et imprévisibles, où il y a des mandats électoraux qui commencent et qui s'achèvent, et où il faut parfois recommencer les efforts qu'on a entrepris pendant des années. Le rôle de ces individus, de ceux que nous allons appeler les leaders, qui sont capables de porter des impacts dans leur communauté, leur rôle est fondamental pour atteindre les objectifs que nous nous sommes assignés. Et c'est pour cela que nous avions rassemblé ce panel très riche de personnalités qui vont vous être présentées tout à l'heure pour nous amener ensemble à réfléchir à comment est-ce que nous pouvons capitaliser davantage sur le leadership pour mener à bien les missions d'évaluation. Et ce panel va être modéré par une personnalité qu'on ne présente plus dans le monde de l'évaluation, M. Hopwood, au Sénégal pendant plusieurs années, qui vit au Sénégal, qui est un champion de l'évaluation en Afrique francophone et au-delà de l'Afrique francophone, qui a fait émerger beaucoup d'évaluateurs émergents et qui est président d'honneur de l'Association sénégalaise de l'évaluation. Donc, sans plus tarder, je vais lui laisser la parole, Monsieur Hopwood, pour...
And who is honorary president of the Senegalese Evaluation Association of Evaluation. So without further ado, I will give him the floor, Mr. Jano Pug, to introduce us and lead us into this beautiful discussion. And I wish us all a very nice discussion. Thank you. Y'all.
In Kansas City, attending the American Evaluation Association conference. That Patrizia or Edoé will let me know if my connection goes down and if there's a problem of the clarity from my side. So thank you already, Edoé and Patrizia, for the backup. Thank you also for all the participants who are joining the session today on this extremely important topic. And I will be very brief in my introductory remarks. I will just remind ourselves on this topic of transformative leadership in evaluation. And I think we hope in this session, and this will not be the end of the discussion, it is a contribution to an ongoing reflection as to what are the challenges today and tomorrow for evaluation. And so I'm just going to summarize the first of all the objectives. We wanted to clarify the characteristics of transformative leadership in evaluation. Well, how does this represent? How does this express itself, this leadership? And I think amongst the participants, you should feel free to share in the chat, to share in the comments. If there is time, we will leave time for interaction with the participants. What you feel are the characteristics. What have you observed yourselves in transformative leadership in evaluation? And we want to promote this exchange as an ongoing exchange in the context of the work that Edoé has described. So we want to promote an exchange. And we want to explore what are the new competencies, what are the new skills, what are the new abilities that we need to develop, or for that matter, for others who are involved in development processes. We are now in a very different context of global transformation, and this will require new competencies and new skills. Future leaders. Leadership does not just come overnight. It is something which grows, I think, through experience, through trainings, through motivation. So how can we improve that? So I think these are the dimensions we wish to explore in this webinar now, and we have a rich panel. So let me just now briefly say a word about the panelists that we have together today. Firstly, we have Dr. Bara, who is an expert in the development and the management of programs for more than 17 years in the area of public health, governance, and leadership. And he has worked with USAID, with many different organizations as a consultant, bringing his expertise with regard to strategic initiatives of a major scale throughout Africa. He is the former director of the Regional Center for Leadership, the YALI Center in Dakar, where he has inspired many, many thousands of young leaders, young African leaders in the area of entrepreneurship and public management, and in citizen involvement and in professional training. So he's actually now at CESAG, and he's the co-founder of the Institute, the African Institute for Leadership and Entrepreneurship. So Dr. Ndiaye will be is working very much in the area of local capacity and the promotion of a sustainable future for African young people. So very much he is somebody who has been a leader for the development and the training of young people. The second presenter I will mention is Dr. Ian Goldman, who's president of the International Evaluation Academy, an M&E specialist advisor with the South African presidency. He was the Deputy Director General in the South African Department of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation, until 2018, when he established the National Evaluation System and was a founder of the 20 African government at the national level and also interaction between African governments. He was a 3IE board member, and he has worked with the CLEAR evaluation centers he is working with them for Pakistan and Central Asia and Anglophone Africa. He is an adjunct professor at the Nelson Mandela School of Governance in the University of Cape Town, and he's the editor and author of a very interesting publication on evaluation and evidence use in policy and practice, lessons from Africa. And his focus is now on addressing the polycrisis, and his work on this has started in Samia, where Ian has led a process of developing evaluation criteria and guidelines on transformative equity and climate and ecosystems in health. So, he is focusing through the International Evaluation Academy on how evaluation can play a role in addressing the polycrisis. So Ian Goldman brings a very extensive experience working with government and the international evaluation community on addressing the polycrisis. The third presenter is Elena Bardasi, who's a senior economist at the Independent Evaluation Group at the World Bank, where she leads the gender work stream and has authored multiple landmark publications on gender evaluations. And she's also been looking at she's been leading the evaluation by the Independent Evaluation Group of 10 years of the World Bank and IFC engagement for gender equality, and the World Bank Group's work in supporting work for gender equality in countries affected by fragility and conflict and violence. And she's currently leading an assessment of the sexual exploitation and abuse and sexual harassment as part of a major evaluation coming up at the World Bank. And prior to her current position, Elena was part of the World Bank's Poverty Reduction and Economic Management Network, where she led the unit's work on female employment, entrepreneurship, and contributed to numerous reports. So she has been involved within a major complex organization handling sensitive and very high-profile issues in her work. So we have here a diversity of presenters, and it gives me great pleasure now to give the floor to the Dr. Bara Ndiaye. Chaque presenter will present for 7 to 10 minutes. I will be very attentive to make sure we stay within those limits as far as we can. Then we will have an interaction with the panelists, because we've had questions already from the participants at this session. We've had a number of questions that the panelists will address, and then we will open up the discussion. You can put your questions in both either the questions or the chat, and Patrizia will help me monitor those. Be brief with your questions, so that we can get as much interaction as possible during this session. So I think that's the way we will do things, and then we'll have a brief conclusion at the end, which, as I said, will set the stage for further work in this extremely important area. So having said that, I think we can now pass the floor to Dr. Bara Ndiaye, who will be the first speaker. Bara, you have the floor. And Bara will speak in French, so make sure, for those who are not speaking French, you press the right button on the interpretation.
Thank
tous les organisateurs de ce panel.
To pay a sharp tribute to all the organizers of this panel. All the panelists, but also all the participants, and especially to you, and for the extraordinary work we had to do together in thinking about developing the strategic plan for child survival and using the excellent marginal tool bottleneck. I would like to share my screen, to allow everyone to follow. I'm going to start by setting up the subject, and we'll start with this global definition of leadership, which takes into account the dimension of the community. So as you see in this definition, I would like to make a little reflection. 2 reflections, because it is part of the situations and complexes that I have experienced. The first reflection It was an ex-entry evaluation that we carried out, which was called the Learning Maturity Model. It was a question of using a scoring system with weighting and giving stats to each country. It happened that the stats we have. He was not happy because he had not a financial age, and the lower the stadium.
Résultats pour pouvoir présenter quelque chose qui allait attirer les partenaires financiers pour continuer l'investissement. Ma question et mon questionnement, si en tant qu'évaluateur, quelle est votre opinion et que feriez-vous? La deuxième réflexion, c'est que dans une démarche qualité pour laquelle j'ai participé,
in a quality approach for which I participated, I noticed a very good practice called the evaluation of professional practices, and I wonder in relation to evaluation. What type of accreditation do we have for our evaluators? Who evaluates the evaluators? Do we have a system for evaluating professional practices for evaluators? Transformable leadership. And at this level? Values. Transformational focuses on the evaluator. So that's why. The evaluator before the evaluation, it's as if I were saying, the leader before the leadership, the coach before the coach, the administrator before the administration. And what are the goals of this transformational leadership? Above all, there is the action that comes back in innovation. Transformation is first and foremost individual because transformational leadership begins with oneself before spreading within organizations and communities. Innovative responses are also very decisive. Promote role models of leaders who are resolutely committed to serving as capitalizers for action on a national scale. The sustainability of the results are very important dynamics. Now to pause on the word transformation that we find in leadership. Transformation, we have to consider that it happens when the person recognizes, after if and let go of an automatic way of being in order to make something new possible. Transformational leaders have this distinction at our given moments in their lives, they choose to break away from a routine way of helping and choose a path. And at that very moment, they are considered crazy. The objectives at this level are the ability to create a different future. Deep desire, that's also important to get involved, to realize your future. The value and the ability to achieve this commitment. If we look at this diagram, we are all very often in our comfort zone, which represents the translation zone, which represents the green and blue zones. Very often, we surf at this level on the things we control that we know. Very few people try to explore the zone of transformation, which is the zone of the fact that I do not know the money from what I don't control. If you see, it's a real potential, something that gives us the opportunity to explore and make discoveries. And there, illustration, and that all the people who have made discoveries, who has changed our lives, at some point, they opted to migrate to this area of transformation so that they could realize that they have this potential and that they didn't master this thing before they started, and that eventually, their discovery has completely changed everyone's life. Let's try to see what the distinctions are in transformational leadership. There is a lot of talk about distinctions. Competences. Competence is recognized by the person, and competence is also distinguished by fundamental. So, first skill and the thin. The transformational leader and his ability to think and project himself outside the frame, what is called the tomorrow, one of the qualities, skills, leadership transformation. And in strategic formulation, it helps a lot because before the determination of the vision, determined, we need critical thinking. We need design thinking to formulate and make strategic formulations. Transformational leaders also have this skill, this distinction of decline. Manage your time. To manage this priority, I put the illustration of this Eisenhower matrix, which has many advantages, which has limits, certainly. But applying by managers can help manage priorities. But the transformational leader, he has this skill. It even seems innate to recognize these priorities and to focus on the elements that are important and urgent at the same time, but also the elements that are important and that are not perhaps urgent, and that allow him to plan for this. He has that possibility as well. Develop conversations to generate the relationship, and the relationship, identify the possibilities of the possibilities. Seizing opportunities helps the opportunity go to action. And for this pyramid of relationship, we say that the one who is going to go to the top, he will broaden his relational base. But also the fact that he's in action, it gives him strength. He is an actor at the same time. He is the power, he has the power to act, he has the initiative, and he has responsibility. He anticipates and manages the complexities. Complexities in the face of uncertainty. It's like he had this skill to do foresight with one or two major trends. But uncertainties. But he really has this confidence, this faith, this self-sacrifice, and this determination to help the front. The fact that it also manages and anticipates its complexities allows us to be classified as certain complexities in terms of social dynamic complexity. Emerging as an example, emerging complexity. When we had coronavirus, there was no solution strategy that we had established. But we needed transformational leaders to show us the way and to enlist others in his own vision, and the leader of Transformational is concerned about the future and that at some point, he has the obligation to make a statement of possibility that gives him the chance to do good ones, successes, progress that we call breakthroughs, but very eventful. In this progress, there will be failures that we call pans, but his particularity is to get up after each failure. Also is a special dimension because he has the ability to recognize, to control his emotions, all while dealing with the emotions of the people around him. So the evaluator as a leader, he applies leadership qualities to drive the process. He leads the team, defines the framework and communicates effectively. Mr. Facilitator. For the moment I will stop at that while waiting for the questions and exchanges that could be pursued. Thank you.
Now we will turn to the real world, where these qualities and these competencies are necessary and are applied in different ways. And I think our next two presenters will be able to contextualize what you have said in the different environments in which they have operated, both at a national level and at a global multinational level. So I think now we would pass the microphone to Ian Goldman, who will share his experience as well, both at the level of government, in academia, and the international community. Ian, you have the floor.
Hi, everybody. Good to be with you. And I think this is a very important topic on leadership, and I think Bara's touched some really important points and of the way leadership needs to change. I'm just going to cover four sort of main issues. One, the polycrisis, which needs to drive us in a different way. Some work from the International Evaluation Academy using the 3 horizons futures thinking to see how evaluative practice can be transformative. What does this mean for systems change and then for leadership? And first of all, just, we're not in normal times, we're in very abnormal times, and unfortunately for the rest of all of our lives, that's going to be the case. We're in a polycrisis, which is ecological, economic, geopolitical, etc. dimensions. And it's driven by an economic monomyth of infinite growth, of expropriation, of exploitation, and unchecked wealth concentration, and driven by a hegemonic worldview deriving from imperialism, colonialism, etc. And we have to find a new way of seeing the world, and our leadership has to help us to get there. So in the International Evaluation Academy, we've been exploring this future using a 3 horizons approach. And this looks, first of all, at what is the current situation, Horizon 1, which may have been fit for purpose at one point, but is decreasingly less fit for purpose with time. What is the aspirational future, in this case 2035, that we would like to achieve? And then Horizon 2 is how do we get there? And that's got areas that may just get captured by the current situation, and the transformative initiatives that take us towards this aspirational future. And the core messages that have come from this work is, first of all, that evaluation is not effective in addressing or voicing the deepening polycrisis and the transformations required. That what we're hoped for in 2035 is addressing the polycrisis systemically and systematically. It's being used across policy and organizational cycles. It's a core competency and continues to evolve, and it is valued by wider society. And to get there, we need people engaged with or inspired by evaluation, leading and taking the power. So how do we make this leadership happen? And that's what I want to just explore a bit. Now, for each of those horizons, we actually have maps, which I'm not going to go through, but I just want to touch on the transition, the change map that we have. And that's, if you look in the center, it's people engaged with or inspired by evaluation are leading and taking the power to change the field. And you see systemic leadership, that there's appropriate leadership groupings to drive field-wide transformational change, that we're able to dream a vision not of the world that we currently have, which is increasingly moving in a very negative direction in many ways, but towards a regenerative paradigm with new measures of well-being, which are not based on GDP, but are based on the well-being of the population. And it's going to take active groups of people taking the leadership, not waiting for leadership, taking the leadership to make that happen. And for that to happen, at the bottom there, you see we've got to transform our values, mindsets, and competences. If you look on the right, we need to decolonize and reposition evaluation in centers of power to focus on how we address the polycrisis. And at the top, we need evaluation practice to be repositioned as a core element of the work of civil society, government, and private sector. And all too often, it's an orphan. It's not seen as fundamental. And then we're going to have to change our practices on the left there, using systems approaches, technology, foresight, and local knowledge that are appropriate to culture and context. But now, if we want this type of system change to happen, this is from what's called the 6 conditions of system change from the Water Center. And so what we often see is the stuff at the surface, the policies, the practices, the resource flows, and we often spend a lot of time on evaluation policies and guidelines and whatever. But actually what's driving whether these really make a difference is the relationships and connections between organizations, between people, and between humans and the rest of nature. And if these relationships are relationships of domination, then it leads in a certain direction. If they're relationships of co-creation and trust, they lead in a different direction. And so we also need to really understand the power dynamics of what are going on, because these are really driving whether policies or practices happen. And all of this is being driven by our mental models and our values. And if we're going to get the transformative change that we need to move to survive as humanity, actually, to survive, we have to change our values and our mental models. And that's a big challenge at the moment when we see extremely negative values and mental models being thrust, particularly from the global north, on the rest of the world. So what are some of the changes that we would need to see? We need to focus on truth and values, on different forms of knowledge, especially holistic forms of knowledge, which we see in indigenous cultures, as well as in Eastern religions, etc., but are very foreign to much of Western culture. We need to focus on well-being rather than growth. Our current models are just are sucking up wealth to a very small group of people. We need to be focusing on well-being for all. We need to move from separation between people and seeing people as other and nature as other, to which allows exploitation, to a relationship that is generative, and that a relationship where we recognize that we're part of nature and that nature has to survive if we are to survive. We need to understand these complex adaptive systems and how they need to change. And we need to change the power dynamics and decolonize power from the global north, from the center to the periphery, to wider citizens and the global south. And we need to promote the use of evidence, not misinformation, which is, of course, where evaluation has a big role to play. But then we need that expressed in the policies and practices which are regenerative. And we need to see that money is taken out of politics. It may seem impossible, but for example, Australia has limited political donations to 50,000 Australian dollars, and we need to radically increase equity. Now, how are we going to do, what does this mean for leadership? We need a change in values and mindsets to relational, trusting, and regenerative values and mindsets, which recognize the rights of nature and life. And this is where indigenous values and knowledge systems like Ubuntu are very important. We need the inner quiet and determination to recognize but not respond to the provocations from negative players and vested interests. And we need to move from ego-driven competitive approaches to collaborative approaches, which motivate staff, which support teamwork, and which help us to build the partnerships and coalitions which we need for change. And for this to happen in policymakers, we need the motivation capability and opportunity to use evidence to inform the transformations required at a time when so much effort is going on from so many players to promote misinformation. And we need the ability to understand and navigate power dynamics, to build the relationships and coalitions and become system transformation entrepreneurs. And a key skill that's needed for leadership is the ability to navigate bureaucratic processes, which are often designed to promote inertia and compliance, towards a progress towards urgent transformative action. And it is possible. But this is not what you learn when you're doing an MBA. We need a different set of values. We need a different set of approaches. And just to say that the Academy is working with Eval Partners, IOCE, Ideas, all the regional VOPs and Eval for Earth to provide systemic leadership to take this work forward, linked to the Global Evaluation Agenda 2. And happy to follow up in questions. Thank you.
Set of changes and new dimensions to evaluation, which you strongly emphasize. Where our plenary session yesterday was really talking about how evaluation can project to the future rather than evaluation looking to the past and drawing lessons from conventional programs and projects. How can evaluation connect with other actors, such as the future planners, the foresight, and so on, and change the focus of evaluation work as well? And so I think, and the other thing which comes out of your presentation is what is the autonomy? How far does evaluation, the evaluation community, evaluators, do they have the freedom to move in these directions when they are often working in circumstances where they are part of larger organizational structures and dependent on others, the planners, the policymakers, and others? Evaluation is not a self-standing and an isolated activity. So you talked about relationships. She talked about interaction, about systems, and so on. And I think that's a good connection for our next presenter, who is working within major systems and has been working on some very sensitive and important issues within the World Bank, the complex World Bank system, which is typical of many other global structures and organizations with large funding obligations and with an active evaluation office. So I think Elena's experience more on the side now, we're giving voice to some of these issues within the functioning and making evaluation more central to decision making will be some of the areas that Elena can explore. And I'd also just point out that we're not alone, and that Michael Quinn Patton in particular, as one of many, but perhaps an outstanding example of an evaluation leader who has been in inspiring us and encouraging us to think differently, to think outside the box, as Bara and Ndiaye described, and to really take a more global and holistic approach to our work in evaluation with new values linked to the polycrisis. So, Elena, you have the floor now. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Ian, and thank you, the organizer, for inviting me to join this very illustrious panel. I will be very, very practical and reflect on my own experience in working for more than 10 years in IG, the Independent Evaluation Group of the World Bank Group. That's a very complex organization, and that's an organization that changes, that has very different stakeholders internally with different interests, sometimes conflicting, and with not necessarily a very strong culture of evaluation. And in IG, of course, we try, our immediate stakeholder is the institution, is the board, is the top management. And if I would like to adopt, if I would like to propose a definition of leadership, we are called to bring a positive and lasting change, to be impactful and transformative in such an organization. So the way I try to structure my speech today is to reflect, based on my direct experience, on three main qualities that I think are characterizing a transformational leader and the transformational evaluation process, and also three main challenges that I think can threaten this intent. So the first characteristic that in my mind makes a difference in really playing a role of transformational leader in evaluation is the ability to propose a very strong conceptual framework, something rigorous, something that can be innovative, but something that also resonates with the stakeholder and can propose a new platform, a new vision, a shared vision. We did that. The opportunity arose in an evaluation on aging that we did a few years ago. And we saw the opportunity to bring together different parts of the organization around a framework that didn't exist at that time. And through dialogue and through exchange, there were, macro people, microeconomists, the pension group, there were gender group. Aging, of course, has a ramification everywhere. We try to propose and work together on a conceptual framework that even before the evaluation was completed, was actually used in some of the operations directly. And we thought this was a nice example on how it's, through rigorous study and in collaboration, it's possible to present a new framework. The second characteristic is inclusiveness. I see this very much as an important, essential element for in cross-cutting subjects, gender being one, is not the only one, climate change and so many others, poverty, of course. So very often in a complex organization, many different people work on these different topics in silos. And the ability to, in evaluation, a leader in evaluation, is really to try to bring together and promote a dialogue across silos, build connection, foster shared understanding. And for the two, for the two gender evaluation that we just completed in the past years, we try to do exactly that. The bank, IFC, the periphery, the front lines, the top management, everyone had different, was invested in working on gender, and through the evaluation and through also a good circumstances, there was the new strategy being prepared, it was possible to foster this dialogue that continued across the organization. The third element is engagement and co-creation. And this consists in creating through channel of communication and engagement before, during, and after the evaluation, and creating spaces for collaboration, actually, and even co-creation. In this evaluation, we try to do so by establishing a regular connection with the community of practice of citizen engagement. This was an evaluation on citizen engagement. We started sharing methodologies, tools, and even after the evaluation was completed, years after the evaluation was completed, this is a 7-year-old evaluation, very recently, there was an engagement again with the community of practice where they wanted to collaborate to use our tools in order to reproduce findings, update their findings, and use them to try to maintain citizen engagement as a top priority of the organization during a period of major changes. I also have identified three challenges that I face regularly, that my colleagues face regularly, and I think they are important to address in order to maintain this transformational quality to the evaluation function and the leadership. The first one is making the evaluation relevant and maintaining it relevant. This means listen to what are the stakeholders' needs, the expectation, what can be the right ways of addressing the expectation of the institution, which is the one that is in power of bringing change. It's not the evaluator directly that brings change, but the agenda is the agenda of the institution. And so working together, establishing feedback loop, making sure that we maintain relevant and our evaluation resonates with the needs, I think it's critical. The second one is the sustainability issue. I am the gender focal point, and of course, maintaining channels of communication with the gender expert in the bank, the managers that work on gender in the bank, is very, very important, even outside of the evaluation. It's very important to use various channels of dissemination to reach different audiences. And it's also important to derive different products for them. We used, over the past year, after completing the evaluation, many different instruments and tools, blog, podcast. We are producing now a new tool to present the findings in different ways and trying to reach these audiences. This is very important. Finally, adapting to changing times. We are in a difficult period, as you know. I work on very sensitive topics, gender-based violence. These are topics that in some context cannot even named anymore as such. And we need to find the strategies to continue to raising inconvenient truth, even when very close to us, this is not necessarily easy or welcome. And in this case, I would say, working in IG, the leadership needs to be at all levels, and I'm very lucky that my vice president, for example, is extremely supportive in continuing to speak truth to power and to bring up, continue to bring up our, our vision, our commitment to continue working on gender-related topic, violence, and so on. I think this is essential to maintain relevance. I'll stop here. Thank you all, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Elena. We raised again some very important points, which another reflection. So for all the participants now, we've heard a perspective from the leader in many ways of some of the youth training and youth development, Dr. Bara Ndiaye. We've heard the voice of Ian Goldman from working with government, but particularly now taking advantage of the space offered by the International Evaluation Academy and other opportunities. And you've also heard the voice of a senior evaluator breaking down some of the silos, working towards co-creation. So we're in a situation where there are multiple voices, multiple expectations, and how do we react and respond to that? And I think the final slide was talking about raising uncomfortable truths, raising inconvenient comments. I think that is one characteristic of leadership and evaluation, is that would it be the canary in the mine, but would be the voice that would be raising some issues that the hierarchies and the bureaucracies and the current orthodoxies are not ready to recognize. And I think it's that convergence of these voices from the different perspectives which will bring change. But it's a big challenge for evaluators. It needs not only technical skills and competencies, it needs a strength of character, it needs a sense of abnegation, which I think Bara talked about. It needs some rather special characteristics. Let us now turn to the questions. We already had in advance a number of questions which have raised some very important points. So I think at this point, we will spend a few minutes responding to some of these questions. They were already addressed partly in the presentations, but I will take the advantage now of asking our panelists to respond. If I can start with maybe a question for all the panelists. If you have an example of how can leaders inspire, innovate, or maintain motivation, particularly in resource-constrained situations where many of our participants are coming from. You mentioned this already, is there a point you'd like to emphasize how a leader can really inspire, innovate, or maintain motivation? Maybe I'll throw that out to all you. Maybe you have an example. I think people are looking for examples. Can I ask each one of you to say a word about that? Bara, do you have a word to say about how a leader can really motivate and innovate even in a situation of resource constraints? Maybe you have an example. Over to you, Bara. Je peux le dire en français aussi, n'est-ce pas? Comment les dirigeants peuvent inspirer, innover.
Merci beaucoup,
Okay.
Ian. La question, elle est très pertinente et c'est ça qui est même attendu du leader transformationnel. Et je pense qu'à travers ses compétences, la première chose à faire, c'est comment il doit développer son mindset à inspirer les autres et à enrôler les autres dans sa vision. Et je pense qu'aujourd'hui, nous vivons dans les organisations, dans les équipes, des situations complexes, des situations difficiles et nous avons besoin de leaders qui inspire. Je donne toujours l'exemple de la maladie Ebola en 2014 parce que j'étais en Guinée et il fallait faire des quick assessments dans les communautés et en ce moment, les populations ne voulaient pas voir le personnel de santé parce que le personnel de santé, à chaque fois qu'il y avait un malade, c'était la dernière fois que la famille voyait le malade. Donc, c'était très dangereux. Mais il fallait faire un quick assessment pour identifier les nouveaux représentants de la communauté. Et ce qui nous a aidé à avoir des résultats, c'est parce qu'on avait des leaders qui nous motivaient, qui nous inspiraient et qui nous rappelaient quand même l'impact qui est attendu par rapport à notre travail. Et je pense qu'en connaissant la finalité de l'action, en connaissant que l'impact qui est attendu va changer la vie des populations, en connaissant l'ampleur et la motivation, je pense que ça peut nous renforcer davantage. L'autre aspect qui est important, c'est la valorisation des membres de l'équipe. Et je pense que ça, on oublie très souvent, on ne valorise pas assez. On parle des évaluateurs, mais je pense qu'on doit faire beaucoup de plaidoyer pour la valorisation des évaluateurs, pour qu'on les prenne en compte dans les systèmes de politique publique, dans les systèmes d'organisation privée, mais également dans les systèmes d'organisation de la société civile. Maintenant, on peut prendre des exemples par rapport à des parcours de personnes. Quand je prends l'exemple de Nelson Mandela, je prends l'exemple de Steve Jobs, qui a été cherché même de son entreprise et qui, à travers ce choc-là, lui a permis d'avoir une prise de conscience forte. Et cette prise de conscience, qu'est-ce qui découle? C'est la prise de décision. Et cette décision qui découle d'une prise de conscience est une décision forte, avec abnégation, avec foi et avec conviction. C'est là le fondement de la transformation et du leadership transformation.
Okay, merci. I will ask others to add to that. Maybe Ian might say something, also linking it to his own experience in government. One thing I would say about leadership, and it came out, I think, in Bara's comments, is we're not all really aware of what we can do It is when we are faced with situations which are unexpected, which are challenges that maybe we've not really been thinking too much about. And I've seen this in many circumstances, that people rise to the challenge and people show really quite extraordinary and unexpected qualities sometimes when they are faced with an immediate challenge that they have to do something. And I think the example of Ebola and so on is a very valid one in that circumstance. And I think there are many other areas. So my advice to all those attending today is go outside your comfort zone, be a little courageous, somewhat courageous, and put yourself in a situation where you face new challenges and you will surprise yourself. Ian, do you want to say some word on these methods of innovating and leading in a situation of resource constraints, maybe tying it in with your work on the government side?
Yeah, I mean, so for example, I think one of as head of the evaluation system, I mean, one of my big roles was to build confidence in the other director generals that we weren't there to punish them. We were there to try and improve the performance of government, and I had to build their trust that that's what we were trying to do. And one of the ways we did that was through a 2.5-day course, which I've mentioned in responding to one of the questions that we did for the top 3 levels of the public service, to try and show why evidence was important and how it could be used to improve the way government works, and use that in a way so that everybody does better. So the heads of departments would be seen to perform better, ministers would be seen to do better, etc., etc. So you're building a sort of a win-win picture, but by showing that the importance of learning and that the role of evidence, including evaluation, but also other forms of evidence, to try and improve that learning. One other point I just want to say is that leadership's not just at the top. Leadership can be expressed at all levels of an organization. And I mean, just another example in the DPME, for example, there was somebody who was a director under me, so she was 2 ranks under me, who was very successful at building links and alliances, and has been, she's still there, across government around how you use research synthesis and evidence synthesis to inform processes. And she's been really, really successful working under the radar to try and build these connections. So a lot of it is around your authenticity, your ability to build trust, your ability to show that you can add value, and in that way build the confidence and people's will to try and do things differently. And Elena Hazel, who's also on this call, I worked with Elena to do a hackathon with the South African M&E Association. And again, it was voluntary work by people donating, which led to, in our case, 3 guidelines, which are significant guidelines in South Africa, which were developed by voluntary work by a range of people from the South African M&E community. And so, again, if you can inspire people and build the trust, it's amazing what you can do, particularly using a co-creation model.
Okay, thank you so much, Ian, for these examples. And I think the purpose of CLEAR and of the Twende Mbele and the work of the AFREA and the rest of Francophone d'Evaluation is really shared in these experiences so that we can draw inspiration, we can use some of the materials, we can adapt them. And I congratulate all those who are sharing. Maybe, Elena, I can turn to you. You can come back to this issue of how to innovate in resource-constrained environment. But maybe you're not working in quite the same resource-constrained environment. So maybe we might ask you to say something about how evaluation leaders can influence public policy to ensure value for money for government policies and programs. We haven't really talked very much about this connection between evaluation and resource allocations. And can you take us a little bit further on that? How evaluation is maybe influencing decisions about resources, and maybe a way of building a better momentum for evaluation leadership is when you can show people, yes, evaluation is not just something which will help you plan for the future, but it will also help you make better use of existing resources. That takes us back to the resource-constrained environment. Evaluation can be helpful maybe in this regard. Can you reflect a little bit about that issue of resources, resource constraints, and the use of evaluation then for allocation of resources?
Yes, I mean, there are two aspects here. One is our own resource constraints, meaning the resource constraints for engaging in the evaluation. And I think that here, the model that in my mind seems to be more successful is to maintain a stream of engagement, meaning very often the challenges or the when we just do an evaluation for a certain periods and then we move to other things. In my mind, the best way is instead to maintain linkages that allows to establish trust, that establish connection, and this can make the best use of resources that even at the bank are not so abundant anymore, even for us. And so this allows to build on our work for a stream or a set of years, actually. This is what I'm trying to do for gender, for example. But there is another aspect to your question, if I understand well, which is how do we raise the issue of constrained resources for making change? And so for how to, in our evaluation, address this issue of resource constraints in order to move an agenda to a new level, for example, which is also an issue. For example, we see that for gender, and I can see also in other fields, but for sure for gender, the aspect of resources in the bank allocated to this subject is not as much as fits our vision for the gender agenda, is not commensurate to the type of ambition that we are putting forward. And this is always a very hard issue to raise in an evaluation because, of course, there are decisions about resources that are not up to us. However, one way that I always see again and again and again in evaluation is that we are not, so if we are moving to more bottom-up approaches in rather than using top-down approaches implied by the bank supporting big programs or projects, we could use much better the local resources, the local experts, the creating capacity. And this is in the medium and long run, a much better way of increasing sustainability, increasing ownership, and also doing so in a resource-constrained environment. So I believe that this element we raise very often, or I raise it we find it very frequently in evaluation, but is one that is harder for the institution to embrace fully because it's a different model, it's a different paradigm.
Okay. Thank you for those reflections. And I think that in terms of our exchanges now, in all the panelists, we're talking about trust, building relationships, having empathy, understanding the situation of others, of trying to, and I think these are the characteristics of leadership as well, of showing how the resources can help everybody have a win-win. But as Ian Goldman pointed out, it's not always possible. Sometimes there are real conflicts of interest and or between different interested groups, and evaluation needs to be equipped then to present the uncomfortable messages and to take a position on some of these things. We're advancing in time. We have, I'm sure, questions that Patrizia has been monitoring. Maybe one question I wouldn't want to leave without mentioning. Is there a single lesson for young and emerging evaluators in this situation? Should they be discouraged? Should they give up and find some other more comfortable job? Or should they really feel this is an area where they can make a difference? And if so, how? Do you have one message? Maybe Bara, do you have one message? Just one. Be very brief for the young evaluator. Ian, do you have one message for the young evaluators very brief, please, and then I'll ask Patrizia to talk about if we're having other questions in the questions and the chat box. Just one message for our young evaluators who are listening.
Le message que j'ai, c'est un message de valorisation. C'est un message de voir le monde que nous vivons aujourd'hui. Si nous voulons apporter des réponses, il nous faut regarder le monde après.
Thank you. Thank you. Ian, your message for the young evaluators who are connected.
That to not see evaluation as separate, to build their skills in planning, monitoring, evaluation, and learning, and to understand that it's a whole value chain, and this idea of evaluation as something separate is part of the problem.
Okay, thank you. And I think also we could maybe get a good political sense, because we're talking about politics and about power. And evaluation is raising questions about the future of our societies and the future of our resource allocations.
Yeah, maybe if I could add to that, Ian, is what's really critical. I mentioned it in response to one of the things, but what Elena's been raising, I think, are the knowledge brokering skills, which you need to deal with both the supply side and the demand side, the policymakers, and how to make messages appropriate, how to make them interested. So you need to learn facilitation skills. It's a key message.
Absolutely. And I think Bara in his presentation did remind us that there are some things we know, but there are many things we don't know, and there are things that we even don't know that we don't know. And I think the humility and the sense of having some perfect formula is going to erode our confidence and credibility in evaluation. And I think we need to have everybody not despairing because there are so many gaps in our knowledge, but to say together we can keep on learning, keep on finding ways of facing the challenges, not getting discouraged, and finding some mutual support and benefit, because there are good news stories always in any circumstance, however dire the human situation, we can find examples. So I think the evaluation has to find what needs to be improved, but also what needs to be given value, and including, as Ian pointed out, leaders at every level. So I think Patrizia is online now. Patrizia, do we have some questions? We probably have enough questions for a whole week, but we'll allow you now to raise a couple of questions from the selection you've made. Over to you, Patrizia.
Thank you, Ian. Yes, indeed, we received a lot of questions. Some of them have already been answered in the chat. Others, I tried to summarize one that was a little long, but in essence, the question was, what are the keys to transformational leadership that enables a shift from a culture of evaluation focused on punitive accountability to a culture of continuous learning and innovation that is kind of capable of overcoming resistance from vested interests. So I don't know who would like to take this question, and I hope it was clear. I am paraphrasing a longer question that was left in the chat by Muhammadu Masek. So if anybody feels like this is a question for them, please.
I could respond, Patrizia. So, I mean, one of the ways we explicitly tried to deal with it, because this is a huge problem, because most bureaucracies operate in a punitive way. There are very few bureaucracies that I know about that operate in what I would say an empowering way. But in South Africa, what we did try and do, and I mentioned this 2.5-day course that we ran, was explicitly to try and help leaders in the different departments see the use of evidence as creating a win-win rather than audits where they would fear punishment if they got a bad result. And I think, and this 2.5-day course, for example, the invitation to the course went out from the Director General in the presidency. So it sort of had authorization at the highest level, and so was seen as, well, this is something that the government is promoting. So we have to find our ways to do that sort of thing.
Thank you. As
Do you have a second question, Patrizia?
yes, I do. And the second question that I would like to pick is from Cecile. She's asking how can AI support transformational leadership when it comes to culture change, given that cultural issues are highly sensitive and we are trying to ground decisions in evidence-based data.
Who would like to say something? Bara, do you want to say anything about this cultural side? It comes up a lot. We talk about Made in Africa evaluation. We talk about the imposition of modalities which have grown out of other cultures and so on. Do you want to say a word about that, the cultural dimension that you think is important for transformational leadership? Maybe do you have an African leader of transformational evaluation that you would like to mention? Maybe our president of Afrea maybe could be considered leadership for transformational evaluation, Miche, or peut-être others. Do you want to say a word about that cultural dimension when you're dealing with your training for young people as well? Bara, did you hear?
Oui,
Please go
oui,
ahead.
oui, bien sûr. Moi, je pense que le leader africain transformationnel de l'évaluation, ce sera vous, parce que vous êtes un grand Africain, Yann. Mais la dimension culturelle, elle est très importante en leadership transformationnel parce que ce qui peut marcher ailleurs, peut-être ne l'est pas. Moi, j'ai eu l'expérience de piloter des évaluations très, très difficiles et je pense que l'exemple que je donne, c'est quand il fallait faire une évaluation sur la vulnérabilité des groupes clés dans le cadre du VIH-Sida. Et quand on fait cette évaluation, on touche à des sensibilités parce que la cible va être des prostituées, des homosexuels. Et rien que pour trouver les cibles avec effet boule de neige, c'était très difficile d'avoir des personnes qui sont préparées à travailler dans ce contexte, à répondre et à entendre même les histoires, les récits de vie. C'était très important. Et je pense que si on n'intègre pas toutes les dimensions de la société, toutes les dimensions culturelles, on peut même avoir un problème avec nous, nos représentations. Maintenant, la dimension de l'intelligence
Okay.
artificielle également peut beaucoup aussi aider. Merci.
Merci, Bara. Ian, I have also.
Remind just about.
I'm sorry. I have also another
Go
question.
ahead.
There was always the question I asked before about AI and how the role of AI in making in supporting transformational leaderships when it comes to culture change. If anybody would like to answer to that, but there is also another one that goes a little bit more at the core, like what difference there is between the transformational leadership and the traditional leadership in evaluation. Could you make the difference? And if there is a difference, what is the difference? Thank you.
Moi, je peux répondre sur cette dernière.
Oui, merci. Allez-y.
Oui, et je pense qu'il existe plusieurs styles ou natures de leadership. Et le leadership global, il y a de l'influence, mais la particularité du leadership transformationnel, il y a la considération individuelle. Ça commence par soi et ça s'étend au sein des communautés. Il y a le comportement ou une présence convaincante qui prennent position et font appel aux collaborateurs à un niveau émotionnel. La dimension émotionnelle aussi est très importante. La motivation inspirante est une dimension et la stimulation intellectuelle. Et je pense que ce qui les caractérise, ce sont des gens qui ont une vision très lointaine, un mindset très fort qui leur permettent d'abandonner une manière routinière d'être. Je l'ai dit dans ma présentation, les leaders transformationnels, ils savent abandonner, ils savent prendre une autre voie qui est différente Et en ce moment, ils ont une vision et ça leur permet d'atteindre leurs objectifs. Et c'est la motivation sous-jacente qui les caractérise et qui va les aider à réussir tout le temps.
Merci, Bara. Ian, Elena, would you like to come in any of the questions? Elena.
Yeah, I wanted to add something on this one, on the traditional versus the transformational leader. I see this division also very much related to the accountability versus learning function. To me, a transformational leader is able to spur action, and action is mostly spurred through formative evaluation, through evaluation that are seeking a learning element, an evolution, if you want. The accountability is very much related to the past and to, you know, the static rather than the dynamic element. So I think that this is very important, and I believe that at least where I am in IG, we have been trying to move much more towards the learning element and the formative element rather than stopping at the accountability element. So that's, I think it's quite important.
Thank you.
Okay. Time is not on our side, as they say. So I think that we need to be moving towards wrapping up very soon. On the cultural side, I would also remind us that there has been work in East Africa in particular on the way in which evaluation principles of accountability of learning are reflected in African culture. And there's been work done on Swahili culture and how that can relate then to the way in which evaluation is practiced. And I think the other thing which I think Ian and others have emphasized in the past is evaluation can take many different forms. We should not be locked into one particular modality, but according to the circumstance, we have a broad range of tools and possibilities. And I think the leader is the one who's aware of these and can choose the right tool for the right opportunity. The use of policy for decision making is available. It's download. You can download it. Maybe somebody can put in the chat a reference to that publication. It gives different examples of the way in which evidence has been used within the African context. So we do have examples of leadership by individual evaluators or by actors in countries like Benin and others, where we've been for the Journée Béninoise d'Évaluation, where we have a whole generation who have been constructing on a long-term basis. I think leadership is also continuity, it's perseverance, it's persistence, it is adapting to the various changes and the challenges and so on. So these are some of the issues which I think we've touched upon, but are very important. So, Patrizia, how are we doing for time now? I think we are said we're winding up in I think 6 minutes.
Yes.
Maybe we should just give all the panelists one final word, which they would like to leave as their last key message. I see that Edoé is back online too, so he might have also one final word, and then we will move to the closing. I don't think it's possible to do any detailed summary. I think we summarize as we've been moving along. A lot of interesting ideas have come up, and lots of scope for future meetings and future seminars and discussions. So let's take the panelists in reverse order that we took them. So we'll start with Elena. If you can make just one final, I liked her last comment, but all her comments. One final comment, Elena, before we close the session. You want one key message?
Yeah, so when I was invited to this panel, I kind of say, oh my gosh, I mean, transformational leadership. Am I a transformational leader? I never saw me, you know, like I try to reflect on myself. You know, a lot of the things that resonated with me. I think what resonates the most is that there is an element of ethic and integrity that in my mind is characterizing a transformational leader, and permanence, persistence. So I think I'm left with this one, and I think it's going to be a personal reflection as well as, a message for others.
Thank you. Ethics and integrity, persistence. Okay, Ian Goldman, one final thought.
Yeah, and what I'll do too is I've got a slide which I'm not going to show, but I'll add it into my PowerPoint, which talks about the shifting paradigms from M&E as it's traditionally been done to the way it needs to be, which I'll add there. So that helps to the transformational versus the traditional, I think. But I think just for me, the point is we have a very uncertain future. And we all have a responsibility to take leadership. It's not leaving the leaders to do it. It's what role do we play, and how do we play our followership role effectively, so we influence the systems that we're part of. Ndiaye in the chat said we can't change systems. If we don't change the systems, humanity will not survive. We have to change the systems. So what role can we play in our world, in our monitoring and evaluation or evaluation world, whatever it is, to make changes happen? And that's what the Academy is trying to work with in the evaluation field. And it is possible. And we have to do it.
Thank you, Ian. And one thing, congratulations to Ian and the South Africans too. They have documented their experience, and a lot of the valuable experience, and the people all signed up now, and what you have known, a lot of it is not documented, it's not shared, it's not published. And you can go to the African Evaluation Journal, you can go to numerous publications where the experience has been, analyzed, capitalized, and that is very important too. So I will do a little bit of a publicity there for, not it's the only experience, but they've taken the time and the energy to evaluate it, to document it, and to publish it. Okay, Bara, your last message.
Merci Yann. Ce que je peux dire comme conclusion, que le leadership utilise l'évaluation comme un levier pour la performance. L'évaluation informe et renforce les pratiques de leadership. Cette synergie, elle est essentielle pour créer des équipes performantes et engagées. Le leadership de l'évaluation est aussi essentiel pour créer un environnement où les évaluations sont utilisées de manière stratégique pour promouvoir la performance et le développement. Mon dernier mot, c'est la valorisation et le leadership de l'évaluateur avant l'évaluation. Merci.
Thank you, Bara. And I think that reminds us that evaluators get to know your leaders, not only with an evaluation. Reach out, interact, build confidence, build trust with leaders, so then they can take advantage of the work you're doing. And they are part of the whole co-creation process that is built. See leaders of the people who are holding heavy responsibilities, and help them to better manage those responsibilities. Edoé, perhaps last, you're back. So last thought from Edoé, and then we will close the session, I think.
Merci beaucoup, Yann. Merci encore à tout le monde, aux brillants panélistes. Je crois que pour nous, le message est vraiment passé. Nous pensons que l'évaluation, c'est un engagement à la fois individuel et collectif qui demande à ce que chacun réfléchisse à ses pratiques, se questionne, se remette en cause et voit l'évaluation en tant que action qui participe à la prise de décision comme un outil qui peut permettre de faire face aux défis que nous vivons aujourd'hui et de contribuer à la transformation sociale. Et cette conscience d'acteur social, nous devons l'avoir en tant qu'évaluateurs, non pas seulement comme des simples experts, mais comme des acteurs engagés. Et c'est pour cela que le leadership est très, très important. Pour nous, au niveau du CLEAR, c'est une opportunité que nous sommes un nouveau chantier que nous sommes en train d'ouvrir, où nous allons pouvoir travailler sur des modules de formation dans ce sens, mais aussi, comme Yann l'a dit tout à l'heure, pouvoir capitaliser sur les expériences des évaluateurs qui influencent dans leur société. Raconter nos nouvelles histoires Racontez-nous les changements que vous êtes en train d'apporter. Chaque petit changement compte et ces expériences peuvent aider à inspirer d'autres pour que nous puissions tous ensemble œuvrer à la transformation sociétale. Donc, restons connectés et gardons l'espoir qu'un autre monde est possible. Merci.
Okay. So thank you for those fine words. I think that's a very appropriate closing. So with that, we thank you all. We have been able to answer. I'm sure that the Secretariat will take careful note of all the questions and comments. These are very important inputs for our thinking, for future webinars, for future publications. And it may be possible also in some circumstances, if we have your contact details on certain issues, to be able to get back to you. So we apologize if we haven't been able to accommodate all the questions and comments, because it's we hope also that the translation has worked satisfactorily. Although I've been switching languages, I'm told that's not the right thing to do. So I hope the translation has worked. And I apologize, I even dropped out for a minute or two, but at least my connection is held strong here in Kansas City. And so I wish you all a good day or a good afternoon, good evening, and success in your work. Okay.
Patrizia has something
Goodbye,
to say.
everybody.
Yes, no, I just want to thank you, everybody, to thank you all our participants and remind them that once we finish the webinar, the recording of the webinar and all the presentation will be shared on our website, A Better Evaluation. Since you joined the webinar, you will receive in your inbox a reminder of where you can find this information. Thank you again, everybody. Thank you, Elena, Bara, Ian, and everyone for being with the GEI today. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Merci beaucoup, Patricia. Thank you.
Merci. Goodbye. Okay.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Merci. Merci.